Welcome along, my aspiring allies, and thank you for joining me on this most recent episode of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. So, today, I have just wrapped having our conversation with Verity Glasgow. Now, Verity is the CEO of 1+1, and they are a relationship and relational interaction expert charity, I suppose is the best way to put it. So, they are a charity made up of various psychologists and other experts all around human interactions and relationships. And when I say all aspects, I mean all aspects. So it's whether it's home relationships, work relationships, and everything in between, kids, parents, all of it. And Verity's CEO came along to speak to us today about the work that they're doing and also how we, as kind of leaders and also just human beings trying to navigate life, can really make a difference and improve the health of the relationships that we have in our everyday. And we have talked about everything. We have talked about skills for being good relational leaders. We have talked all about how to improve the quality of the conversations we have, how to argue better, which I think is a fantastic skill that we should all be flexing. There's so much content in there. And we also talked about some downloadable content that Verity has available on the 1+1 website, and the link to that will be in the show notes. So I am absolutely delighted to have had this conversation. Lots of shared stories from Verity as well, which really helps us bring some of the content she's talking about to life. So I hope that you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I have enjoyed having this conversation. So please sit back, relax, and get comfortable in whichever way works best for you. And welcome Verity Glasgow to the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. So, how are you feeling about all this?
Good. Yeah. I feel like I I feel like a bit like when you're thinking, I know all this stuff about relationships, but then when someone asks me about it, I'm not gonna remember anything. So that's how I'm feeling. I'm like,
Which, of course, we know isn't true
I don't
because
know,
you will
Katie.
absolutely
What do
remember it.
you think? Because I don't know. That's how I'm feeling. But yeah, I'll get on a
Ah,
roll. It'll be
you
fine.
will. And I
Mhm.
think that's really normal in that because we know so much. I think this is the trouble when we have these areas of specialism. Like our brains are full of so much stuff that
Mm,
it's I either find myself falling over myself trying to say everything all at once,
mm,
or
mhm.
wondering like, oh, will I have anything there to call upon if they ask? Will they ask the one thing I don't know?
Yes, exactly. Will there be more than one thing?
Yeah.
But I have been, what's been really nice actually is I have been listening to your podcasts. And so I'm actually grateful anyway for meeting you because I've been listening to them. And they're just, yeah, really interesting. Um,
Good.
yeah, no, I found them great. And also because you sort of get people chatting and it's just much more it just feels like a conversation. And what I really like about it as well is when you like check assumptions, because usually that's me going, oh good, because I didn't know that, and so yeah, I've been
Oh,
really
that's good.
enjoying.
So, firstly, I'm really glad this is recording because I'm going to be like, Verity Glasgow said.
This is good. Yeah, no, I really,
She said it and I've got it.
it's been really good as part of when you sort of think, oh, and I, might not have listened to it otherwise. And yeah, it's been really interesting.
Oh, I'm really pleased. Which episode is it that stood out for you the most then?
I actually wrote this down because one person, well, first of all, I was like, blimey, these guys are way more qualified than me, first of all. So there's someone called Enya Doyle,
Yeah.
which I thought was so interesting, like what she does.
A
And
sexual harassment and conflict. Yeah.
yeah, but then she's like, it's the way that she doesn't really talk about that. And then you find out about it in other ways. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. And Priscilla,
Yeah,
um,
precisely.
who's also amazing. And then this other person who was talking about conflict. And then this guy who's,
Yeah, Marie Coombs was conflict, wasn't she?
oh, was it Marie Coombs? Right, okay. And then this really interesting guy who was sort of like social work background. I need to look him up. Anyway, he's very,
Alex Williams was he
that's,
yeah,
yes, I think that's it. Yeah.
kind of mental health and social work.
Mental health and social. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Yeah. So they were my top. They were my top.
Awesome. Do you know what? I just feel like I pulled it. I was like, I need to remember the names of my guests now. When you say these topics, I was just like, oh,
You're doing a really good job of vaguely explaining one of these topics.
no, that's cool. So you've listened to a lot of them. That's amazing.
I have really enjoyed them, I have to say. Yeah, I've just kind of like plumped in. And also what I found was interesting is that I think, oh gosh, no. I mean, I don't what was it? The superpower of sound. I was like, oh, is that relevant to me? You know, when you sort of want to listen to something that's relevant to you. I mean, each one of them I found really,
Mm.
really helpful. Yeah.
Do you know what? This is one of the, even though actually doing this podcast um, doesn't directly input to my business from a financial perspective,
Mm.
it's one of those things that people say, why do you bother? I'm like, the learning that I get from it,
Mm.
conversations with people, firstly, is I love it. This
Mm.
ticks all of my own personal value, like curiosity, like
Yeah.
it fills my soul up having these
Mm.
conversations,
Mm.
and I think it makes me better at my job
Mm.
because then I'm being challenged to think about things that like you said that when you think about how sound
Mm.
and I was like, well, I would never know any of that. And it's
No.
nice to have a little bit of insight to think, oh, okay, that's really different. And now I can build that into what I do. So if people speak about things, I can be like, but you know what? You need to go and talk to Priscilla Lee. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
so I can do a
And
little bit of a talk about it and it informs my thinking.
yeah. And I think also I was thinking that what you're practicing when you're doing it, because you know, when you're listening to a podcast, it's sort of like quite I don't know, it's quite luxurious, isn't it? You just listen. You can just passively listen. But when you're the person who's doing it, it's like, you know, you're intensely listening. And, you know, we talk about that in relationships and stuff like that, about really listening. And it sounds completely ridiculous. Well, you need to really listen. It's like, well, I'm listening, but actually, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And I think with you, you're having to really tune into that because otherwise you could just you know off with
Yeah.
fairies
Yeah,
and
if my
then
mind wanders and I'm like, I'm sorry, what was that?
sorry, what's that important point to me? So anyway, I was thinking that's probably quite a good sort of, you know, practice ground for like listening as well.
Yeah. And also trying to remember, like when people say things, if I'm like, oh, that's interesting, ordinarily I'd hear something, I'll Google that and find out what that is later. But
Mm.
actually, in the moment, having to remember, yeah, can you tell me what that means?
Yes, yeah,
Because
yeah.
if I'm thinking that, other people are thinking, I'll have to Google what that means. And it's like,
Yes.
no, we're gonna cover that for you.
Yeah.
Um, or even sometimes hearing maybe kind of, especially in the inclusion world, some of the jargon that we come up with.
Mm.
And even though I know what it means, in having people just expand, remembering to get people to expand on it, because actually a lot of the stuff that we talk about when we are the subject matter experts, we
Mm.
get so used to saying these things and we forget
Mm.
the basics, don't we?
Mhm, mhm.
Whereas actually it's the basics that are the things for people that really are those building blocks that make them go, oh, that's
Mm.
why, whatever.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And for people who aren't the experts, you know, and that's also something that I find, you know, because I'm not an expert and I work with lots of experts. And so I always feel like if I get it at work and if it resonates with me and I can relate to it, then I think, well, okay, anyone can get this. Whereas if you're a psychologist or, you know, someone who's done a PhD in forgiveness or, you know, all of the other things that my amazing colleagues do, um, well, that's not kind of what everyone can understand. So I think breaking it down like that and then making it relatable, that's sort of really powerful, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And actually, I know even though you say that there that oh I'm not an expert. I mean, I am going to call you out on that little bit because A, you don't do the kind of work that you do without all of this stuff rubbing off and getting picked up on you. So I would say when we think about expertise as being someone
Mhm.
who knows more about the thing than the average person,
Mm.
I reckon you do definitely fall into that camp.
I
So
love that.
I'm not going to let you get away with that.
Really, I love that rubbing off. That is good. That's
Isn't it? Well,
yeah.
just by osmosis around being
Mm.
around people and
That's
being
true.
immersed in something, we do pick up that. And I know what you mean. Like you may not have at the same level of formal qualification, or
No,
and I
but
get that. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but also I think you're also the expert, like you say, in making some of these really complex academic, perhaps
Mm.
topics really
Mm.
relatable, easy to
Hmm.
understand.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So I think that's probably the perfect time to then start talking about this.
Right.
So
Yes.
as the CEO of One Plus One, which is
Mm.
it's a charity, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, for a
Why don't
charity.
you start by setting the scene a little bit about, what your day job then is and
Mm.
how you are surrounded by all these experts that you've just referenced?
Okay. Um, I so I guess I just want to track back to One Plus One and its foundations just for a moment.
Please, yeah.
Because I feel like, I am responsible for One Plus One now in its current state, but it was founded 50 years ago, by this amazing person called Jack Dominion. And he saw a lot of people who were having relationship difficulties and relationship breakdown. And he was like, why is this happening? What's going on? And he really wanted to understand why. And so we were started um, by a curious psychologist. And I think that that's how we continue. And curiosity is a really important part of our role in this sort of early intervention relationship space. Um, so we, started as kind of research, what makes relationships break down, what makes them work, and also the impact on adults' mental health and later on children's mental health and the importance of them. And I think it's kind of interesting that 50 years on, we're still talking about this. So it sort of shows how progressive Jack was when he founded One Plus One, to be talking about this stuff. But I think it also shows how much we still need to do in terms of early intervention relationships. Because I think that when people think about relationships, they think about possibly relationship counseling, and they don't think about the things that you can do early in your relationship to kind of help you through those times. So I guess my job is to make sure that we do that and to make sure more people know about it. And yeah, as a charity, we've evolved over the years. So research and understanding the impact of relationship breakdown, as well as the impact of relationship quality as well on our lives, like the positive as well as the negative, um, is kind of looking at that and then breaking it down into something that people can understand on the day to day. So again, when we were founded, Jack was very much saying, I don't want our research to sit on bookshelves. I want it to be out in the world. I want it to be available to everybody. And that's what we aim to do, is to take that really often very difficult to understand relationship science, and turn it into something that people can relate to. And we have, a small team of the experts in terms of psychologists, but also really creative people, because it takes that creativity to be able to say, okay, so how do we turn this into something that someone will engage with, like an animation or a video or a blog or, an article. So, yeah, creatives, big thinkers, and yeah, a really great team at One Plus One.
I love that. I like the way that you're kind of positioning it as the content is important because we see the social value of it, but also it's the accessibility of that needs to be on point.
Mm.
Otherwise we've got, if people aren't accessing and aren't using it. And I love that you said about Jackson not wanting to just be a book on a shelf, like, exactly, because how many amazing leadership books or amazing self-help books, if whatever we're calling them, have we all bought and maybe either just not read? That's the first barrier, right? We thought great title, super interested, it's now in a pile like yay big.
Yeah.
um or yeah, we read it once and we stick it on a shelf and go, that was cool, and then we forget all the learnings.
Yeah, so true. We sort of like highlight a few chapters and
Yeah, a
then
couple of corners folded over.
side. Yeah, no, it's so true. And that kind of practicing of it as well, sort of learning and practicing. And yeah, I think that it's kind of, it's interesting being a charity because as well, part of my role is keeping us to our vision and mission, and kind of like
Mm.
remembering why we're here and what we're here to do. And not to stray. I think sometimes there might be some interesting funding here or there might be something there, Relationships, I mean, blimey, like they literally are everywhere. So
Yeah.
you you have to be so focused to and be strategic about what you choose to do, why, and really it's all about, reach and impact. You want to get that research, that really, really important stuff out to as many people as you possibly can.
Absolutely. And just what popped up for me there when you said that, because I was going to make the statement when you said, oh, relationships are everywhere. And I thought, yeah, because literally the second you get two people together in any capacity in life. But then I also thought, even that's not true because it's also the relationship we have with ourselves, isn't it? And the
Mm.
self-talk that we have and all. So actually, you don't even need to be around another physical human
Yeah, that's
for
such
this to
a
be
point.
applicable.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It really is. It's not just how you relate to another person, but how you relate to yourself. And also, we would say that actually the first relationship and the most important is how you know yourself and how you understand yourself. And then ideally you've smashed that and you're amazing at that. Um, and which is obviously like very easy. Um,
Has anyone actually got that one nailed just out of
Not
interest?
really. I don't really think so. But then it's kind of then how you know yourself with someone else, and then it's how you know them, in whatever
Mm,
context you're in. So whether it's a couple relationship or a friendship or a work colleague or a teacher, it's just really
yeah.
understanding someone else, yeah, as well.
Mm. Oh, that's so interesting actually, because now I'm a visual thinker, so I'm immediately starting to think of all these different models and things where it's kind of the me I know myself to be, and then the me I know myself to be around these other people, because I can imagine that's not always the same.
Mm,
I know that I do my best to be me
mhm,
as kind of purely as I can, but also, I am different. Like I am
mm,
different around different people.
mm,
Um, yeah, and I love that point of and then how well do we know, other people that we are, in that momentary or long-term relationship with,
mm,
based upon the fact of the bits of them that they're showing us as well, and all the
mm,
bits of them that we get curious about to want to know more about.
mm.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Mm, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I love that you've called out there actually the very different types of relationship that exist because it really is um it's really easy, isn't it, to when our first port of call to either think about, well, there's work relationships and there's family relationships or
Mm,
romantic relationships, and that's kind of it. But this it's so nuanced, isn't it?
yeah, it
In the
really is. And also, I think there's a sort of broader thing around the quality of relationships. And so you can have, multiple lots of friends, loads of friends, and you can be a really social person and all of that. But you can be in a long-term relationship, but it's the quality of your relationship that matters, and that is what is associated with, health outcomes, mental health, physical health, well-being, all of that. And it's kind of focusing on the quality of your relationship, I think. And um, I don't think that people know that as much
Mm,
as they might. We think about how we need to take care of our health in terms of, fitness and nutrition, um, and not smoking and possibly drinking less than we drink and that sort of thing. But I don't think we see it in the same category as um, oh, and I also must really take care of my relationship and make sure that that's good quality, whatever that is, whether that's with your friends or family or whoever. But I think that that's what we need to do, and certainly that's what we're trying to do at One Plus One, is to raise people's awareness of the importance of the quality of your relationships and the impact that can have on you and your life, um, and the things that you can do to improve them. So,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And actually, as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking to myself, how often, this is and I hope she won't mind me saying it, but I have a friend in my life who she is one of those people who shows up for everybody. Like she spreads herself so thin, showing up for and she's got a massive circle of friends that she's a very good friend to.
Mm,
And I have said to her so many times, like, do these relationships still serve you? Because these are
Mm,
kind of colleagues from like 3 jobs ago that you still
mm,
show up for consistently. And I don't think they're giving it back.
mm.
You know,
Yeah,
quite a
yeah,
one-sided thing here.
yeah.
Does this still serve you? Like, it's
Mm,
great that you want to be there, but is it good? And I think that for me just kind of triggered in there, like, actually, when we think about quality, how do we, and actually maybe this is the question for you as well, how do we do a bit of a health check
mm,
on the relationships that we have? What are some of the signs we can look for, or questions we could ask ourselves to help assess that?
mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, on that note, I really think that there should be a relationship health check. I think that would be absolutely amazing, to be able to kind of either self-assess or
Mm.
or have it as part of your annual health check. But I think that that's really important. And I think it would sort of depend, if you were looking at your couple, if you're in a couple relationship, or if you're in a work relationship. And I think that let's say from a couple point of view, how much are you actually connecting as the two of you, compared to maybe how you were when you first, in those early days and when you first got together and all that kind of thing. I think that life transitions can really impact that relationship, and in some ways erode it. And it's sort of looking at our relationships, and any relationship really, as a kind of evolving. And so we as humans, we change, right? I mean, I like things now at my age that I didn't like, 12 years ago, or 15, 20 years ago. We change, and we also get to know ourselves better and all of that. And I think then, our relationships also change. So we need to keep in tune with them and the other person who's changing as well,
Yeah.
and not expect those things to stay the same. And if we don't stay in tune with that and don't kind of attend to that, um, and just sort of take it for granted, then I think that we could possibly, it could erode, like the relationship quality could reduce. Um, and so, yeah, another thing would be sort of checking in on the time you're spending together. I think the quality of the time you're spending together. Are you actually, you know, are you sitting down just scheduling stuff? Or are you actually able to have conversations? Are you making time for each other? Are you recognizing where the other person isn't quite themselves, and actually kind of calling out on that and talking to them about that? I think tuning in, is just really important. And again, sort of like talking about listening earlier, it's almost like listening in the relationship, you know, um, have you had fewer interactions than you might have normally, that kind of thing, I think is really important to tune into.
Yeah, that's, I think that's a really good one. Oh God, there was so much that you just said there, that the kind of the threads that came out for me, because I thought actually when you said about we all grow as humans, and it's almost like having it's a really unrealistic expectation to place on other people, isn't it? To think that a relationship would stay the same when the two individuals, for argument's sake,
Mm,
are growing as humans.
mm,
It's
mm,
kind of, it's silly to think that, well, the relationship in its form would not also grow, and it doesn't mean that it changes in a positive or negative or neutral. It just
mm,
becomes a different
mm,
thing, doesn't it?
mm, mm,
And I find that absolutely fascinating. And when you said about life transitions, it often that reminded me of when I think about coaching practice.
mm,
In coaching practice, there's this term we call contracting, which is when you begin the relationship, you
mm,
set up the contract of how will we be with one another in our relationship as coach and coachee. And then
mm,
when things feel like they're shifting or changing, or something comes up that you didn't contract for, you kind of press pause before you get into it, and you recontract and say, well, we didn't talk about how we were going to handle this.
mm,
So how does that fit given the agreement that we made, and do we need to change anything, and how will we be with one another? And that
mm,
sounds a lot like that, doesn't it? Actually, in life, like you say, when
mm,
life transitions happen, It's
Mm,
about taking that minute to just pause and say, hang on a minute, you know,
mm,
now we've had kids, our whole
yeah,
dynamic has changed.
yeah.
Um,
Mm,
this is quite significant. Do we think the rules that we put in place at the start of our relationship
mm,
still apply? What do we need to think
mm,
about? And it's almost like it's okay to have that conversation, like so, and the listening piece to check in and go, well, hang on, this is different. Something
mm,
shifted. We
yeah,
can't just think those rules are the right
are
rules for
still
now.
applying. No, you're so right. And I think also, that sort of, like things happen quickly, don't they? I mean, sometimes a, a pregnancy can be unplanned and you can suddenly find yourself as parents and, in this huge transition and you haven't prepared for it, or you can plan for it and your communication's been so bad that you haven't actually talked about why,
Yeah.
what you're actually going to do as parents. It's sort of all those really important things and being able to recognize, I think, the transition to parenthood's a really good one where we know that there's this graph basically where relationship quality just plummets, right? And that's because you've had this relationship where there's been two of you and then now there's another person, and if you've taken time off work, that
Mhm.
might impact you because that's where you kind of got a lot of that kind of validation for who you are as a person, all of that kind of thing. Obviously, you might not be sleeping as much. There might be other stresses. So all of those external stresses, plus the fact that you kind of change so much. And then you often get this kind of interesting place where the partner can often feel kind of isolated from the, parent, the mother baby type bond. And then that can make them spend less time together and be quite polarizing. So, like, yeah, so many things can happen at that stage. But if you recognize early or even aware that those things might happen, then even when they are happening and you're absolutely exhausted, one of you might remember, actually, no, we need to reconnect. We need to have this conversation. A bit like the contract you're talking about earlier, sort of having that mental reminder of having a conversation. Um, yeah, I think is really important.
Mm. And a conversation, I guess, without judgment or without coming into it expecting a certain outcome, just
Mm,
because that's how you might like, kind of coming into it thinking, well, I know what I might like and I can share that, but that might not be what I get.
mm,
Like that might not be
yeah,
where we end up.
yeah, 100%. And also, we've got this. When we bring all of our research together and we develop these, we kind of develop digital behavior change interventions for parents and couples and things. And one of them is called Arguing Better. And there's why because we've got such amazing creative colleagues. There's this very funny video in one of them where um, it's called You Say I Hear. And I just think this is so helpful, right? And and anyway, it's sort of like shows the mum with the baby and then the dad. And there's this one particular clip where she's sorting out the buggy and he's trying to help her with it. And she's like, oh, give it to me, I'll do it. And then it rewinds. And what he actually hears is, you are not safe to have around our child, And so
Mhm.
it's sort of that when you're tired and you're stressed and you have an off the cuff comment, or the guy comes home from work and she's at home and she's just put the baby down and she's like shushing him, shh, and all he hears is, nothing you have to say matters anymore. And actually, if you heard that, the thing that you'd done, which you actually, thought was just like fine, it really matters, and it means something way bigger than you think it does. So I think those you say I hear conversations,
Mm.
if you can facilitate those, like you say, without judgment and just feeling like safe to be able to share how you are feeling, I think they're really important because um, I have them at home and it's really, really funny, And so I say, I'm trying to think of a recent one where we might have been planning our son's birthday party and I'm trying to remember. I think, my husband was like stressed about it, going, oh God, we've got this on, we've got this on. And then, we've got this. And my immediate response is, well, it's his birthday party and it's really important. And like, we have to do this. And his response, he then stopped me and he was like, I don't think you've heard what I said. Actually what I said was, this. His party is really important and we need to do this. And I was like, oh wow, yeah, you've done that to me. You've done that on me now because I
Mm.
did not hear what you said. Because of course they were slightly different. But it's good to be able to kind of have those checks and balances, I think.
Mm.
Mm.
And I love that you've just given that example, like a real life, kind of everyday example.
Mm.
And I think there is like that's much more difficult um to do than it is to want to do, isn't it, as well?
Mm.
Like that's not the kind of thing we go, oh yeah, that's good. I will just implement that
Yeah. Oh
because it
yeah.
takes a whole lot of trust and safety
Yeah.
and and I guess and communication skill to in that moment be it because I know through various different relationships there will be times where I won't have heard someone even if they said, oh, I think you didn't hear me there, and they'd have tried to I just wouldn't have heard that either. I'd have just been
Mm.
properly grumpy or whatever my emotional response
Mm.
was. I'd like to think now I'm better at
Mm.
that given the work that I do, but I'm sure there are still times where my filter kicks in and I'm still filtering what's being told to me, even though someone could be saying,
Mm.
I'm telling you this is how I feel. It might not be true, but this
Mm.
is my feeling. And I might still be going, yeah, nah, I heard something.
Mm. That is so true. And I think, even because I always think, oh my goodness, if anyone knows what I do, I'm gonna have to just be amazing at relationships the whole time because, God help me if I'm not. And so and actually clearly I'm not because, like we're all learning all the time.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that what I've learned, and particularly, since doing this work and having everything rub off on me and being immersed in all of this, um, is now to just, yeah, tune in so much more to what the other person is thinking, but that takes time, and it also, depends how you're feeling. It depends how stressed you are. So you were just, referring there to if you're, it depends how you're feeling, and if something else is going on for you. And I think that's another really important thing that we talk about is sort of stress and what stress looks like on you and what stress looks like on somebody else. So, for example, in a work context, if you know your colleague well enough, you might be like, yeah, that's not them. They're
Mm,
stressed, and I'm going to just reach out to them and just check, are they okay? But then on the other hand, you might not know that person well enough at all. And you think, oh, why did they just speak to me like that?
God, what a dick.
And so rude.
Yeah.
And then that colors your view of them. But it takes a, but in that kind of situation as well, it takes that kind of what we talk about is sort of keeping the other person's mind in mind. So, but that involves you having to
Mm,
be on top of your mind and your feelings and have that in check. And then when you can do that and you've got the capacity to do that, then you keep the other person's mind in mind. And then you think, okay, right, what's going on for them? Why
mm,
might they have responded in this way? Okay, let's, and that sort of thing. But when you said earlier, it's really not that easy. It really isn't. And we talk about the daily interactions kind of over and over in talk about relational capability skills at 1+1, where we've developed this relational capability framework and set of skills. Um, and so much of that, I think, is about those taking those daily interactions as an opportunity to practice those skills.
mm,
Whether they're with work colleagues, whether they're at home, whether it's with someone on the bus, that kind of thing. But practicing those skills and practicing kind of improving how you listen, improving how you relate to others, and that sort of thing.
mm. I love that concept of keep the other person's mind in mind.
Mhm.
And because I think that it really sums up, doesn't it? That, like you say, you have to know yourself and be okay, check in with yourself
Hmm.
and check in with someone else,
Hmm.
and kind of keep both of those things in balance while you're having whatever that conversation might be. And I wonder, when you're saying there then around putting it into practice,
Mm.
because I know that if I was practicing something like that, my go-to thing might be thinking that I had to try and do that all in my head on
Mm.
my own. Whereas actually, that's probably also a good opportunity, especially given that we're talking about different types of relationships,
Mm.
to also invite the other person to participate in it with you. You know,
Mm.
it's I can certainly in our kind of home relationships, but also I'd imagine in, like you're saying, in good quality work relationships, to be able to say to someone, I'm trying this new thing.
Mhm.
I'm trying to keep other people's minds in mind.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if I'm look like I'm thinking more,
Mm.
this is what I'm doing. Or I might ask you a question that might seem a bit odd,
Yeah.
but go with me.
Yeah.
And can you do it with me? And kind of invite other people into the experience as well.
Mm.
um, because that might make it easier to practice, rather than kind of having to run this narrative in your head where you're like,
Mm.
well, now I'm thinking about me and I'm thinking about you, and
Yes.
and then it just becomes like, oh, I'm tired. I'm going to get a
My
bar of chocolate.
brain is exploding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that idea, sort of inviting, um, kind of just making someone aware that you're trying something
Mm,
out. Yeah, I really like that. We so as part of our um, always being curious and understanding about relationships at 1+1, we did some research a few years ago about the impact of um relationships on the on the workplace
mm,
and work relationships on home. And obviously, since COVID, that's, the workplace is much more at home. And, where is where is work and where is home and where's the line and all that kind of
yeah.
thing. Um, and unsurprisingly, we found that where the relationship at home is low quality, then that impacts negatively on your work productivity.
Mm,
And where relationship is high quality, then that impacts positively on your work engagement and your work quality. And it's kind of cyclical. Um, and yeah, so anyway, we developed this relational leaders training, and we've got these 10 behaviors of a relational leader. Anyway, one of them is keeping person's mind in mind. And so that's the reason for that backstory is I think we need to add that to the training to say, when you're implementing this in practice, just tell everyone you're doing it. Tell everyone that you're trying this out and you're doing these things. And also that's another way of kind of like sharing your learning as well. So
mm.
yeah, I really
Because I was thinking from a trust perspective as well. If I had a like a line manager
mm, mm,
who started having conversations differently with me, but I knew
mm.
why,
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
going to trust them quite quickly with
Mm,
with that, because
mm,
immediately, in just that one invitation for helping them try something new, I
mm,
know they're thinking about the quality of our relationships. They're thinking
mm.
about specifically their relationship with me, because
Yes.
they're inviting me to understand at least what they're doing.
Mm,
um, and I know that they're invested in being as good a manager to me as they can be. and
mm,
and
mm,
it's almost like, okay, that feels really positive, doesn't it?
mm. Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is about kind of caring about people.
Yeah.
Because, another thing I suppose is that because we spend so if you work full time or part time, you're still, well, if you work full time, you're spending a huge amount with your work colleagues, right? Like, they are in your life, they are part of your life. Their behaviors are definitely going to impact you. Decisions that are made are going to impact you. Really, really significant impact there. And so I think that, and if you don't work full time, but you're still working, that's going to impact your life, those relationships. And I think kind of practicing that sort of good quality relationship, uh, daily practice at work as well as at home, and understanding also, as well, that this spill over into home and how that can impact your behavior. And I guess that comes also back to stress and what stress looks like on you. So if you're having a particularly bad day at work and you take that stress home, I mean, if you're working from home, you could take it home at, at lunchtime, couldn't you? You could, take it home and interaction there, or at the end of the day. But how that is kind of impacting on
Mm.
you, yourself, on your partner, on others. It's so important.
Yeah, and that always reminds me actually, that reminds me of an example I always use, rather, I should say, is when we think about kind of the mindsets that we have and how we carry our energy and our emotions with us, and that, and I'm sure this is relatable to anybody who kind of who drives essentially or has ever had some sort of commute to work,
Mhm.
where you encounter someone, if someone cuts you up on the road or does something that really pisses you off, you
Mm,
chunter about that, don't you, for
yes.
ages, right? And it's like you carry that person with you through all of the overtake. You probably watch their car as they've gone past you, and you're like, how far ahead did that get you?
Yes,
And
yeah.
you're watching them 3 cars ahead in a traffic jam, going, and then you go into the office if that's where you're going, or into the supermarket, wherever you're going, and you
Yeah.
take that with you, and then that energy you're bringing, and it's
Mm,
just like, yeah, we just don't let things go
no.
as easily perhaps as we could, where it's like, really, that person doesn't know who we are, they've forgotten, probably don't even know they did what
Yeah,
they did to piss
what
us
they were
off.
doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is so true. That is so true. Yeah. I actually had that the other day. This car on the
Yeah.
road. This
And
car
I
was
say
like,
that because I've absolutely done that too. Like that
yes,
is a real
no.
example.
And that's the thing. I think you can, because also, it kind of comes back to, you and who you are, and you can be someone who's sort of like very relaxed and think, oh, I don't care. Um, or, you could be someone who really does care about that kind of thing. And again, it's sort of using that knowledge, that self-knowledge, to say, okay, so how do I improve this? Because actually, if that's really stressed me out, this, car, like yesterday, this car coming up behind me and taking over in a really dangerous spot and all that kind of thing, then how would I feel in a different context? How would I manage that in a different context? So it is kind of like understanding your response to things better as well,
Mm,
isn't it?
yeah. Oh, it's all data, isn't it? And
Oh,
and you
yeah.
did mention that when you talked about your relational leaders content that you've got, you said
Yeah.
10 things, something that you've got. What were those 10 things?
Yeah, luckily I've written them down.
Oh,
Should
well, not
know
just the
them.
what was the title? What was the title?
Oh, right, no, sorry. They're called 10 behaviors for a relational leader.
10
Uh,
behaviors for a relational leader. And because I
yeah.
think, is this something that's available as a download on your 1+1 website?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But seeing as
Yes.
you've written them down,
I
then
mean, I've written them down. We've already covered the keeping the other person's mind in mind. And actually, being curious and exploring,
yeah,
which is kind of what we are saying about calling someone out if they appear to be different, they seem stressed. It's kind of reaching out and saying, "Are you okay?" That
yeah.
sort of
What's up with you?
going on. Focusing, tuning in, and really listening. All of those things that we were talking about earlier. Making sure that you are actually really listening. And I think using listening as a broad term, so not just listening in a meeting, but also maybe in the tone of their emails, or if you're using instant messenger, or however you're communicating, or body language if you're together. I think, yeah, listening to the whole person and really focusing on that is so important. What else have we got? Check your beliefs and assumptions, which you do a lot, I think, and that is just so helpful because I I assume a lot, you know.
Humans assume a lot. We just do. We can't help it.
It's nuts, isn't
There's
it?
too
And you
much
just,
information for us to not do that.
yeah, and then you get to the end point on something and think, why did I assume that? Like, why didn't I check that right in the beginning? And sort of, yeah, so that's obviously really important. And then being flexible, so not having the same approach to everyone, and looking at what might work with one person and what might work with another person. Um, Developing a shared purpose, which I think kind of comes back to that, actually really caring about people. So if you care about the people you're working with, I mean, it's quite easy at 1+1 because we have a vision as a charity. We all are just completely and utterly passionate about relationships. And so, in a broader sense, we have a shared purpose because we want to get this stuff out there to everyone. But I think, in your individual interaction, um, developing a shared purpose kind of develops that trust between you as well.
I was going to say, is that more challenging though in a non-work context? But I suppose that does that also then relate to kind of having shared values or
Mm,
kind of
yeah,
common interests as well in your personal relationships that might be outside of work?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, shared values, common interests. And it kind of comes back to that where we're in the couple relationship, where things change. And we talked earlier about kind of coming back together and sort of checking in really and going, how are we doing here? Are we still, do we still have shared values? Do we still have a kind of shared purpose here, the two of us? And I think that's really important. And often those conversations, there can be too much time between them, where there's so many life events and a lot of things happen and you're busy and all of that. So kind of really checking in with each other and checking kind of how you're doing and are we still on the same page type thing.
Mm, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And then we've got tapping into your feelings. So, and again, I think, I honestly, everything that we do, by the way, is kind of grounded in the sort of, comes from the couple relationship research and then it's been adapted and we adapt it in different ways. Um, but tapping into your feelings, I mean, that's just so important, isn't it? Because it's sort of like, how is this impacting me? How is this impacting my feelings? And obviously that impacts your behavior, thoughts, feelings, behavior kind of pattern. So how am I feeling? Is this impacting my behavior? So keep doing that. Regulating your response, I think. So based off the back of like
And that is so much easier said than done, isn't it? Let's
oh
face
yes, I'm
it.
just going to regulate my response. Yes.
Just regulate your response. Okay, cool. I'll do that then.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's really easy to apply every day.
Because I'm usually so chill all the time.
Oh yeah, and I'm not at all stressed, and that doesn't impact me in any way because I'm so relaxed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But then again, then it comes back to everything you've already said, isn't it? About when we check in with ourselves, be curious about ourselves, if we are really listening, if we're these things kind of layer, don't they, in different ways, that if we're practicing these little things,
Yes.
actually it probably does become easier to regulate how
Yeah.
we're responding. Because there'll be that moment within us that goes, or even maybe even after the fact of going, oh, that was a bit harsh. And then
Yes.
maybe saying, gosh, that was a bit harsh.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. 100%. Absolutely. I think you're so right about that. Just practicing, and even if it's just one of those things that you practice, um, has when you see it having an impact, you think, oh, I've short-circuited that by this amazing skill that I've learned. And also just remembering that it was in fact what your previous guest, Enya Doyle said,
Yep.
which I loved, where she said, I think she was referring to the fact that, I can't remember the stat, but it was like, well, 98% of jobs we have to learn, or some high stat, right? And she was like, no, 100% of the things we have to learn. Like, we
Oh,
come out into the world, we don't know anything, And I loved that. And I thought about it in the context of relationships, obviously, because, um, and I thought about how, where, whether it's a friendship as a young person and how that impacts you, whether it's, a new relationship and you've been in quite a difficult one and you're adapting to a new one. I think, all these skills, um, we learn from that very early age of watching our parents and seeing how they interact and seeing how they argue, because we all argue, and seeing how well they do it and how well they kind of come back together. And then the impact, if that isn't going well, obviously can really impact us as children. So we see them being modeled everywhere, modeled as parents model, but also, in school, we see them playing out in the playground. Um, and I think that point, just going back to that, is that, we learn from day one about good and bad relationships and how to do things. And I think if we can learn earlier, how to, um, you know, how to keep someone else's mind in mind, or how to have some empathy, or how to recognize, because one of them is of our behaviors is around recognizing where something's gone wrong and recognizing how to repair it. So we call it kind of rupture and repair.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and I think, it's the same in relationships, recognizing in a friendship where, eek, that's not gone well.
Yeah.
We're a bit disconnected. How can we repair that? What do we need to put in place? It's the same with the workplace relationship. Being able to recognize that and then put something in place that rebuilds that trust, or, rebuilds that connection between you that might have been lost. So, mm,
Yeah, absolutely. And that was so interesting when you were talking there about actually like, and thank you for the callback to Enya's episode, because yeah, for me that was a bit of a sort of mind blown moment when she said no, 100% of things we have to learn. And it's like,
yes,
oh yeah, of course, like of
yeah,
course that make
it makes
when
me
you
feel
hear
so
it
much
that
better,
way, you're just
doesn't
like,
it?
that's
Mm,
so obvious, isn't it? Because we
mm,
aren't, I wasn't born knowing how to, put up a shelf. Like, didn't
yes,
happen, had to learn it.
yeah,
So like, and I just find that was such a thing. And actually you're so right when you say it's all about our frames of reference. We only know what we know because of the things we've been exposed to, or the things that someone has sat us down and taught us
mm,
specifically.
mm,
um or the situations we've been, like, we're all products of our environment.
mm,
And that's kind of it, isn't it? Until we find ourselves in a new environment or with a new experience or something else that then feeds in, and it's like, okay,
mm,
that's in the bank and now I know that.
mm,
And we do, I often find, as humans, we beat ourselves up about not knowing things or not having a frame of reference, but especially in the work that I do.
mm,
You sit down and have a conversation with someone about, okay, well, what is race, what is racial identity, where did it come from, how is it made, and people are like, oh my God, I didn't know any of this. And it's like, well, no, doesn't get taught in our schools, doesn't, we're
mm,
not talking about it. And it's, you didn't know because no one told you.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
now you know. So now what do you want to do with that information?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like,
Then
it's
it's on
okay.
you. When you know, then it's like, okay,
That's
yes.
it. It's okay
Yeah.
not to know, but now you
Mm,
do.
mm,
And actually, I really like the point you said there as well about good and bad relationships. And I would really then like to ask your thought on this, because I've got a real thing that I'm developing. I was going to say a bugbear, but I don't even know if it's that. It's just a thing that sits
mm,
with me, where I just don't believe in the concept of things as being good and bad anymore. I don't think life is
mm,
that binary. I think
mm,
we have relationships.
mm, mm,
Sometimes we are doing them well,
mm,
sometimes we're doing them less well, and
mm,
that has a lot to do with how am I, how is another person, what's going on. Like,
mm, mm.
sometimes we're killing it, sometimes we're really making a hash of it.
Yeah,
And
that is so, I love that actually. I love that because you're right. It's like, um, I think it's, I think that it's about, you know, it's about calling it a day, right? So it's like you said earlier, is this serving me? Is this actually serving me? And what I actually talk to my daughter about, because she's nearly 12, and friendships at that age, what? That's really, oh my goodness, sort of like having
yeah,
flashbacks. And she has some friendship struggles, and we talk about this seesaw. And I sort of say, is the good outweighing the bad at the moment? Is the fun stuff and the way that you connect and all of that like up here, and then the not so great stuff down here? Yeah, no, it is. Okay, fine. Well, then I think, you got to take it. But if that starts to rise up, that part of the seesaw and the not great stuff starts to outweigh the great stuff, then is it really serving you? Is this something that, would be good to carry on, or maybe it's just something that isn't good to carry on?
yeah,
But I think you're right. And I think in relationships, it just becomes way more tricky because, like you say, it's not binary. It's not like, right, today it's bad, I'm ending this now.
yeah.
This is the end of our relationship, by the way.
You left
And
the
because,
toilet, it's up, we sit up, we are done. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah, I've told you once, you've had the opportunity to change and you haven't, and
yeah,
that is it. And you're right, it's not that, is it? You kind of um And I think that now I'm loving this because I feel like really my mind is being, is like thinking about lots of different things. And I think that it's it's how you keep being. I don't want to use the word happy, but how you keep the the way that a relationship can enhance you, I think, is really important, and bring out the best in you and tap into those things you didn't know about yourself. And I guess, like, yeah, the way a relationship serves you in that way, and how you can keep that being, something that is not a day to day, but something that kind of you tap into more regularly than once every few months, for example.
Mhm.
Um, as opposed to, something becoming really toxic, not spending any together, having very polarized views. But how do you spot that early, and how do you start to see the signs of the fact that actually we're not compatible? We
Yeah.
actually don't work and will probably not work long term, and it'll probably get worse. So, sort of, rather than recognizing what's good and bad, is it recognizing and being able to identify what works for you in any particular relationship, and be able to spot early on when that's not working for you, and therefore, you kind of attempt to move on, but it's not that easy, obviously, in some lots of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and the being able to communicate that then as well, isn't it? About the noticing and talking about it and kind of
Yes.
having that exploration of like, this is a thing that doesn't work for me. If this is a
Mm,
thing that works for you, that's okay, but it's not for
mm,
me. And just being able to have that kind of that level of honesty. Because
mm,
as you were saying, that it reminded me of God, like a relationship when I was in my 20s, and the stories I told myself to make myself feel better, because I was a good
mm,
person. I was great at this relationship. He was a complete, plonker.
mm,
And it was because he did all these things with a reason that our relationship didn't work. And it
mm,
wasn't until a while after that I had to stop and acknowledge, like, no, I contributed to that too. Like when I
yes.
reflect on things, I was like, no, my behavior also wasn't awesome, and
Yes.
I didn't do my best listening, and I wasn't all invested. I was just looking for the evidence that reinforced my feelings about what was going on, so I could
Mm,
be, ha, see, I told you you weren't
yeah.
pulling your weight. And it's just like, oh gosh, yeah. Now you see it, don't you, after the fact.
Mm,
But for me, then it comes back to that narrative. Like in my head, I was a good person. Like
yes. Yeah.
I wouldn't behave in that way because
Yes.
that would make me a pillock, and I'm not a pillock. I'm great. So it was kind of like not going to listen. And actually, for me, it's that I love the seesaw analogy as well. It's
Mm,
because sometimes I will be the person pulling the seesaw down,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I have to be okay with someone telling me that, and
Mm,
also be okay with the fact that I'm going to do it. Like,
yeah.
yeah, do you know what? I'm going to cock up. That's
Yeah.
absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But then when you do, then being in a place that's safe enough to go, kind of like have someone point it out to you, like we were talking earlier, and you kind of recognizing that they're not judging you, they're just trying to move this on and have a conversation about it, and then get everything sort of back onto the, you know,
Yeah.
a balance, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and having that person point that thing out to you, like allowing it to feel bad, but
Mm.
knowing it doesn't make you be bad. Like, it
Yes.
can feel uncomfortable and like, oh, like that, because there's nothing worse, is it? When someone points something out and you know they're right, and you're
Oh,
like, ugh,
so annoying.
it's
No,
oh.
I know. And the worst thing is when they point it out to you and you're supposed to be the relationship expert, they are not. And then
Yeah.
they point it out to you and you're like, yes, okay, I realize that. It's just
Thank
like,
you.
thank you for that. But it's that kind of thing where we talk about where, in relationships, and when you're arguing a lot and things, and we've got extra pressures and stress and stuff. And then you start arguing about the sort of surface level things, and you argue about the dishes, or who's
Mm,
taking out the dogs, or who's taking out the bins, or who's doing this or that. And it is not about the dishes. Like, it is so far away from being about the dishes, but it's those things that start to build up and build up. And if you can't even identify what it's about, or you can, but you're not talking about it, that's where you're not recognizing, we talk about that, those sort of ruptures, and recognizing where something hasn't gone well. And Are you attempting to repair it by having a go at them for not doing the dishes? Probably not. You just
Yeah,
really,
is that the solution?
is that really the solution? But that's it's much easier, like you said, much easier said than done. And I think also I feel quite strongly about just sort of societal, we as society, I don't think support each other to talk about the difficult times in relationships. So I think that we idealize relationships in some ways, and we talk about, oh my goodness, it's amazing when you get together and it's all just so fantastic and it's so celebrated, it's all wonderful, and you talk and talk and talk and talk about that. And then once you know that it's absolutely like, hit the end of its life, then you're really able to talk and talk and talk and talk about how, much you hate the person and how awful they are and all the things they did. But we don't talk and talk about the middle stuff, which is the daily, the things that you argue about and the
Yeah.
things that, you don't always agree on and the things that you find difficult. And you might go through a stage where you argue way more, and then you come out of that and you've kind of reconnected and that's reduced again, and then you might come back into another stage, and that's really normal, you know
Hmm.
and looking for the tools to be able to navigate that and have that conversation. I think if that we were more open in society about relationships and not seeing that as being kind of shameful or you failing, I've failed. It's like, I think, if you're going through the menopause, for example, and I mean literally
Yep.
my thoughts are just not I can't get my words as usual as I maybe used to do. But anyway, I don't feel like I've failed. I feel like my body's going through a process and I need to be open and honest about that. But I think often in society we can think that we failed if our relationship isn't a success and if it isn't,
Yeah.
what it's supposed to be. And I think that we need to do work around that to talk about when we're arguing. And it's really hard sometimes.
I think that is fantastic. And I just wrote down, because again, like you, if I don't write things down when they're in my head, once that thought's gone, good luck to you, it ain't coming
Yeah.
back. Um, and I wrote down the messy middle because
Yes, that's it.
that's what I call it in the work that I do. Like we get so wedded to being at complete opposite ends of right and wrong, good and bad, all of this stuff. But I'm like, it's the messy middle that
Yeah.
is where real life happens.
Mm,
And I
mm,
love that that's exactly what I think that you're saying, what I'm hearing you say there is actually, yeah, we love the stuff that we put on our social media of the fancy holidays and the birthdays and all the celebrate. And it's just like, we all know nobody's life's really like that, not permanently.
mm.
Because if it is, God, that would be unbearable.
Yeah.
But I would think so anyway. No, it everything's complex and complicated and it
Yeah.
is full of arguments, whether it's with friends or bosses or partners or like
Mm,
it just is parents, children,
mm,
like gosh,
yeah.
everything's a bloody mess, isn't it? A lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. My colleague always says, relationships are messy. And yeah, they are. Whatever relationship it is that you're in, they're not, when they're, when you're in a period where they're working really great, then that's great. There will come a time when you disagree about something because you're humans, like, and often when you've had the biggest arguments and you're able to actually talk about that, then that's when your connection is so much deeper because you know each other better. You
Yeah.
kind of like, and then that helps you to shortcut the next argument,
Mm.
and the next one. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point, actually. It's the and I think you to rewind to something you said earlier about arguing better.
Mm, mm,
Um, because actually and this kind of overlaps with the Mary Coombs episode when she talks around conflict. She's like she won't talk about conflict management because she's like it's just a fact of life.
mm,
It's it's about having a healthy conflict. And this sounds like how do we argue in a way that is knowing that we're coming at it from a point of disagreement. We've got to
mm,
arrive somewhere, and
mm,
that somewhere might even be we continue to disagree.
mm,
But we know that we can do that in a way that isn't attacking one another or being harmful in some way. It's just figuring out how do we argue,
mm,
like what's
yeah.
our argument style.
Yeah, and there is it's kind of interesting because there is a kind of we do have our styles, don't we? And that's another thing that taps it that you tap into, because if you're if you just kind of need to slam the door and leave and not speak to that person for a while, and your partner is someone who really, really, really needs to speak to you again, everything blah, 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 immediately, then that's
You've
going to
just
be
described my
really
relationship, by the way. He's out the door, and I'm just like, no, no, I need to talk to you, and can I have a hug as well, please?
yeah, please hug me. That's literally exactly the same as me. And so, and if you've got, first of all, if you've got those styles, oh my goodness, to begin with, it's just so hard because,
Yeah.
you can't show empathy, you don't really understand the other person's point of view, but then you learn about their styles and you learn, about yours. And then, you learn to adapt, don't you? It's all about kind of adaptation.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that like tuning into our styles of fight, flight, freeze, that kind of thing. What stresses us out, what stress looks like on the other person, all of that, like you said, it's all data, like all
Hmm.
of that knowledge about yourself and all of that knowledge about another person that you're interacting with is the thing that's going to kind of shortcut any argument. And actually, the argument just being, something that you're not agreeing on, and then it comes to an end, whether you both agree or you don't or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's showing how you end up, I suppose, collaborating in some way, on that point.
Yeah. 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 Because you have to arrive somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't stay in a perpetual state of arguments because
Yeah.
otherwise, well, I guess that's different. And then there's probably then there is the additional argument to be made that
Mm.
maybe this one's ran its course.
Maybe it's run its course. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Oh, right. So we have got to be recap. There's been a lot that we've gone through, which I think is
Mhm.
awesome. So
Mhm.
we've really talked all there around the difference in like home and work relationships and
Mhm.
actually how they're all one and the same pretty much for most of us
Mhm.
at the moment, aren't they? But then
Mhm.
you very handily shared your 10 behaviors of the relational leader, which is a download on the website. So I'll make sure I put a link to that in the show notes so people can come
Mhm.
along to the website and go and get a copy of that because I'm
Mhm.
conscious people will probably be listening to this as they drive, so they won't have been scribbling those
Like
links,
me. Mm.
or at least they shouldn't have been if they are driving. I don't condone that.
Mhm.
Yeah, we talked all around the qualities of relationships, curiosity, frames of reference, arguing better, good and bad, the messy middle. There's been so much stuff in there. So I'll make sure that when we pop this through my handy AI tool, we'll get all of these key takeaways
Mhm.
summarized out as well, so that people can have a little recap of all of that because there's been so much great content. But Verity Glasgow, what I do need to ask you, is there anything that you came along to say that you haven't had the opportunity to say?
Um, I think the only thing that I would say, which has been like a big learning curve for me, which I suppose I wanted to say, is a bit like when, we met at the happiness index and we were talking there about the spill over. And I think that probably something I haven't really said is about when neither you or your partner have got any capacity to support each other.
Mm.
So where it's all going on for you at work and it's all going on for them at work, and none of you can stop and really listen. You can't,
Yeah.
absolutely can't keep their mind in mind. Your mind's already exploding. And the fact that, that's a perfect storm ready to happen. And I think that kind of recognizing that we can't do that all the time. And sometimes, that will happen. And it can often be a time where, it's almost like, setting the reset button, taking a pause and thinking, actually, this is impacting too much on my relationship or on my life. And I actually need to, you know, tune into myself again because this is getting all too overwhelming. So I think that the point at which it becomes too much for anybody to just sort of pause and take a moment, um, is just it's going to end up in an argument, and
Mm.
it's just how and at what point within that argument. one of you realizes and then kicks in with those skills that you've been learning and that you've been practicing, and short-circuiting it and being able to move it forward. But yeah, not always
I
perfect.
think that's a really good point, actually, because I think that'd be really relatable to people, that it's all very well, again, like we say all of this stuff, and it's so difficult to do in practice. And like you say, when our capacity is maxed out, like
Mm.
there is no room at the inn, like nothing more happening. Yeah,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
do you, like, something's literally, something has to give, doesn't it, in those moments? So how
yeah,
do you have the space to figure out which thing it is that you can put down or think about,
yeah.
you know?
And I think knowing that one of you said this story that I know I've told you before about the morning of the school run.
Yes.
And the
Are you okay to share that again, actually? Because that
Yeah,
was,
I find it, yeah,
yeah.
it's absolutely. I think the school run is one of the most stressful times for anybody who has a parent. Oh, sorry, who is a parent. Um, and personally, we had exactly this scenario where um we were both completely stressed at work. In fact, I was having to go through a restructure, which I was finding really challenging, and I was using all of the things, keeping the other person's mind in mind, all of the things, listening to the people that were going through the restructure and trying to keep all of their feelings in mind. And then, my husband had a whole load of stuff going on at work. And anyway, so yeah, my capacity was really not really available to me at all to think of anything else. And we were racing out the door, trying to get the children to school. And we had to drop off my husband at the train station for him to go into London. And anyway, he was running late. We needed to get to school on time. Couldn't find football boots. It was all very, very chaotic. And it ended up in a big explosion, right? And that was the point where neither of us had the capacity to just stop for a moment, take a breath, which we say, there was no taking a breath. No way. I mean, that was not happening. Anyway, went to school, managed to sort of calm things down enough, be aware enough that I needed to kind of try and keep a lid on this. Dropped him off at the station, took the children to school. They were fine. We had conversations about arguments. They know about, that and all of that. And then driving back from school, um, and he starts calling me, in the car. I'm like, this is really weird. Why is he calling me? I mean, he wouldn't normally call me. We've had this massive argument. He's gone into work. He's on a busy train. And anyway, normally just coming back to who you are as a person, you know, normally he's the person who'd slam the door and walk out. So A, he wouldn't reach out and call me. B, I'm the person he would avoid, right? I'm really avoidant, so I would normally avoid that call. But the fact that he's reached out to me has changed something in me. There's a shift in me there. And I recognize that. And I think, okay, I'm going to pick it up. I answer the phone and he says, can you come and collect me from the train station? I'm like, oh gosh, that's weird. Okay, fine. So then drive back round, pick him up. And when I do, it's not like, oh, I'm really sorry, everything's fine. It's actually really silent, because neither we're still not in a place where we're able to understand where the other person's coming from. There's been a rupture, it's been really hard, it's been building. And there is silence. And, we get home and there's still no kind of like big, I'm sorry. But what we do manage to do is just come together and realize where each other was coming from and what was going on for each other, and get to a point where, one of us can just kind of regulate our response and share what was going on for them. And that was just, a big argument. It was at a stressful time, school run, etc. We've definitely had another one since then. But I think what we learned from that, and what I personally learned from that, was the impact of somebody else's change on you. So if he hadn't called me, I wouldn't have called him. I would have gone home, I would have gone on with my day, gone on with work, wouldn't have seen him for a couple of days. Then we would have got into a busy weekend, and we might not have talked about what was going on, and that was really hard. But actually, the fact that he did do that meant that, we were able to more quickly repair
Mm.
that argument, and that we were able to kind of move on. And I think that's really taught me that, in any interaction, um, whoever makes the first move, and like you were saying earlier, you're not the you're not the bad person or the good person for making the first move. You're just the person that's managed to find a bit of capacity to make the first move, you know. And so I think in anyone making the first move to change that interaction and recognize that something needs to be done, that then does change the other person's response. And there's something really, really powerful about that. So, you know, you have the ability to change someone's response just by the way that you're behaving, just by being a little bit more relationally capable, just by using some of those skills. And I think that's kind of a really important point.
Mm. I mean, I thank you for sharing that again, because I love that when you did your talk at the Happiness Index and that you openly shared that to a room full of people.
Mm.
And so much stood out for me when I heard that the first time, because I was sat there thinking, if I'd have been busy, stressed out, and on my way to work, and I was about to step on that train, I would not have had, and even if I hadn't have been that stressed out, I would not have had the um I don't know, the clarity or the whatever it is to
Mm.
think, what do I need to be doing right now in this moment? What's the most important thing? It's
Mm.
my relationship. Step off the train.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
I would have gone to work because I'm like, it's work, right? Work's
Mm.
important. Work
Mm.
comes first.
Mm. Yeah.
And like you said, go about your day, get on with things, knowing that you're probably not in the mood for it. You're
Mm.
tarnishing everybody. You know,
Mm.
your mood is bleeding into everybody else's space.
Mm.
And I think there is something so emotionally intelligent about recognizing that and going, step off. And
Mhm.
like you say,
Mhm.
then that call to you, where you
Mhm.
then had the same shift in
Mm.
recognizing, okay, something is different.
Mm.
I too will meet that difference with, okay,
Yes.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that, I just found that really powerful and just almost providing the permission of like, you can't do something different.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Do something different. And sometimes it takes something really big to make you do something different. But it definitely, you know, the more you do it, and this is the thing, like where I just think about relationships being sort of like a public health message back to what we were talking about at the beginning, is that, you know, we need to pay as much attention to the quality of our relationships as we do to our health and our fitness and our, you know, nutrition and all of that, because, you know, they have as much of an impact on us as smoking, drinking, you know, lack of exercise, etc. And if we can keep relationship quality good, that is going to have positive effects on us long term. Um, and I and I think, you know, if we leave it too late as individuals, you know, if we take years to decide that we're going to have some couples therapy, imagine what's happened in between those years, you know? And so I suppose that's where I'm just so passionate about this kind of early intervention in relationship and being able to recognize that you can do something. You know, you can change it and you can make it better. And in fact, you can make it even better than it was, you know.
Mm,
Um, but we don't talk about it enough. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm one for sharing and talking about it because it's really life changing once you learn those skills and you're able to kind of be more relational.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for coming along today and to talking to us about this because yeah, I think you were so right when you talked about the messy middle piece and that we aren't speaking about this enough. And actually, if we're all feeling this, if all relationships are this messy, and the more we can talk about it, the easier it becomes then for us to not feel like failures or to not feel like we have to be completely smashing it and sunshine and
Mm,
rainbows all the time. Like, no, no, not life, just not real, not a realistic expectation.
mm,
Um, and actually, what can we do? So that I think is amazing. So all of the resources that we've kind of
mm,
mentioned today, they're all available,
mm.
aren't they, on your One Plus One website?
Plus one, yeah, yeah.
Yep,
And
fantastic.
the relational leaders is downloadable. And then obviously the training is available and people can have the training and all of that. Um, but yeah, that's
Awesome. And if people want to get in touch with you, Verity, so obviously the One Plus One website, I'll put that in the show notes. If people want to connect with you directly, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
probably via LinkedIn, I
Yep.
would say.
So Verity Glasgow, I will drop the link to LinkedIn as well on the show notes too, so people can come and find you. Um, and of course, in true menopausal way, there was a thing that I wanted to say. Oh, that was it, or it nearly went. So I can imagine there are people that are kind of having those light bulb moments whilst listening to this about their own relationships. So I'm
Mm,
wondering if there's a question maybe we leave people with in terms of that health check. Like what are some of
mm,
the questions they need to be asking themselves?
yeah.
Or is there a question you think that it could be most powerful for people to begin with to start that health check and then follow
Mm,
up maybe with you and the resources on 1+1?
mm. I think, do you know what I think one of the most kind of important things, and I think, happened after the Happiness Index conference, where people said that once they heard this story, that they then just went home and just had a conversation. They just had a conversation. They had an intentional conversation with their partner. And I think it's kind of almost as simple as that. It's this recognizing that this thing needs some work. Like we are two individuals, but there is also this living relationship here that if we don't attend to it, it kind of gets smaller and less important. And if we do attend to it, it can thrive. And so I think the thing that I would leave is just to, yeah, to go and have a conversation, intentional conversation, and also with a friend, with someone at work, because all of these interactions fill us up, and it's those daily interactions that are so important, I think, in life.
Perfect. Verity Glasgow, thank you so much for joining me on the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. It's been amazing to have you along.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great, really enjoyable.